for AWS. So, I'm gonna need my phone because I always have a two-factor authentication. So I just go to aws.amazon.com, and then you can click. I'm not sure if so you can see for me it like knows I already have an account, I guess, and has signed in to the console. You can see what if like there's is no account, right? Then you can always do this create an AWS account. All right. And at this point, right, you put in your email address, you choose an account name, right? And then obviously it will send you an email, things like that. Let me click sign into the console. Click next. Put in my password. Yeah, this is asking for my MFA code. So for me, I put in, and I can show you, I like have linked my signing in with my phone. You know, you get this, it like generates like on your phone, right, various numbers. So I just have to put that in, 721, and these change every like 60 seconds. It's just it's like a Google, I have this Google Authenticator app that generates these various codes for me. Okay, so when you sign in, basically you can see, actually this is pretty nice, right? It shows you, here at least it's showing me like cost and usage. This is something to like be aware of, obviously, because you want to keep these obviously to a minimum. Like monitor this, right? The fact that you can kind of see the forecasted month costs, right? You want to keep this fairly low. You know, and basically the way you do that is by turning off services after you sign up for them. So here you can see like there's this search bar. You can see you can type in the names of various like services, meaning, you know, on AWS we can like add a database like we said, which is like RDS, managed relational database. You can add like an EC2 machine, which we'll go through. Okay, S3 we talked a little bit about. So we'll go through these like one by one essentially. Eventually we'll get into Lambda, we'll get into Elastic Container Registry, the service. So a lot of these we'll get into, but step by step. So the first thing we'll do is just click on IAM, and this is for identity and access management. What this means is basically you can create various users. All right, so you know, and these users can have different permissions. So maybe one user gets access to the database, but another one doesn't, right? One user gets the ability to, like, you know, create new services or write to like your S3 buckets, but another one doesn't. Okay, so all I did was I literally just clicked on IAM, or you can type in IAM in the search bar. Either one is fine. Okay, and again, this is for just creating users. You can see that if I click on users over here, here's like the various users I have so far, and then you can create a new user. Okay, if you, like for me, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create an admin user and make sure they have admin access, meaning they have basically access to everything. And then from there, we'll see we're gonna give ourselves admin access and connect that to our laptop. So, you know, I can just put, 2024 admin, just to make it different. Provide user access to the AWS Management Console, providing access, best practice. I don't think we need this, actually. Okay, so I just created the username, and then the next thing for me to do, you can see we can add user to a group or attach policies directly. We'll do attach policies directly. And now you can see this is kind of what I was talking about, right? These are all the different permissions that you get. So for instance, like let's say there's RDS, like a database, right? You can give Amazon RDS full access, meaning like ability to like read, write from a database, probably create one, things like that. This is what it generates under the hood, is like, it really requires a lot of various services just to give you access to a database. But, you could check these. But instead what we're going to do is just give ourselves admin access. And this means basically give this user access to all the services. So I'm just typing in admin, and then I'll click this. Click the checkbox. And then we'll click on next. Okay, so all we did was we clicked on did IAM, we clicked on users, then we clicked on create a user, then we did attach policies directly, and then we just selected administrator access. And we'll click on next, and now we can create the user, right? Okay, so now we have our new user, 2020, whatever the year is, 2024 admin. And then from here, what we'll want to do is like basically give ourselves API keys, like to act as this user. Same thing as signing up for another API, right? You register, you put in your email address, and then you get API keys to basically log in as that user. So to do that, you can see that like now that we have these users, I just clicked on 2024 admin, right? And then I'm going to security credentials over here. And now I'll go to create access keys. All right. So to create access keys, avoid using credentials. We want a command line interface. And then I click, I understand. And we'll see, command line interface, what does this mean? It means the ability to access AWS from our terminal, right? So, which is what we want. And we'll click next and click create access key. So now I have the access key and the secret access key. All right, so we have both of these. And basically we'll use these in order to give ourselves access to AWS from the terminal. So how will we do that? We go to the next lesson, AWS command line. What we'll use, there's this AWS CLI library, okay? So I did it, I guess, with this AWS CLI ignore install 6. My guess is, I guess I would just do this just in case, but hopefully maybe the library's been upgraded. You can just do pip install AWS CLI. You can see that gives you access to this AWS command line interface. So if I type AWS here, so you just do pip3 install AWS, this flag, and now what this will allow us to do is basically eventually interact with any of the services, like create a database, or see the users, or see what services we have up and running from the command line. Okay, so now I do AWS, and in order to, what I need to do, of course, is I need to associate the command line with this account. All right, so like we basically need to have this guy log in. So the way you do that is you type in AWS configure. Now you can see I've already connected mine. That's why it has, like my AWS access key is here. So I can just press return, but what you would do is copy this, right, and paste that into here. Okay? And then you would do the same thing for the secret access key, which will come next. So I'm just going to press return. And then the secret access key, right, again, I already have mine, but you would copy yours from here. Okay? And then I'll press return. Now, the default region name, this is the region that you'll use a lot of the services for. I did US East 1, but if you go to the right here, you can see the different services. So US East 1, US East 2, US West 1, and you can see that where these are located. Northern Virginia, Ohio, California, Oregon. So you want to choose the one that's closest to you. This is where they are physically located. All right, so again, we're going to be using like AWS's computers. Where do they actually live? Like, where are they plugged into on the ground? So they have data centers, they have various centers in these different regions, and the closer you are to it, basically like a little bit faster it is, right? It doesn't have to travel around the world, etc. So for me, it's US East 1. So that's why, I just have US-East-1. These do have to match, like, exactly. And then I'll press return. And then the default output format should be JSON. When I first signed up for this, or maybe they changed the format, I had JSON all capital. If you have all capital, like capital J, capital S, it won't work. So just make sure this is typed in lowercase, and then I press return, and that's done. Okay, this is now set up. You can confirm that by doing, like, you can see that if I do AWS IAM, is it IAM? Let me see the command. It will be, here it is. Yeah, IAM list users. Watch this. So now you can see that this is connected to my account, right? This is showing me the various users that I have associated with my account. So for example, we just created this 2024 admin user, right, in my account, so I see it. I also have this other admin user, DuckDB S3, example, S3 access, right? These match the users that I have here, 2024 admin, DuckDB, example, S3 access. Okay, so this is lined up. So all we had to do, just to like go through these steps again, was I basically signed up, I went to users, right? I clicked on create user, then I typed in, sample user 1. From here, I did attach policies directly, and then I looked for administrator access. You can just type in admin. This is good. And then I click on next, create the user. I'm going to delete this user in a second. And then, and then I go to that user that I just created, sample user 1. And now I would need to click on security credentials. Then from here, we'll go on create access key and say command line interface, right? Because that's my actual terminal. And click on next. Click on create access key, and now it gives me my keys. Then from here, you'll go down to your terminal. You'll make sure you have installed this AWS library. Okay? And then you can just type in AWS to make sure that it's installed. And then the next thing you want to do is type in AWS configure, and that will walk through, associating your AWS access key, the secret access key, the region, and the output format. All right, and then you can just confirm that it worked. One thing to point out is that when you type AWS configure, what this does is it creates a .aws folder for you. Remember when we signed up for DBT, right? We put in our credentials in the .dbt folder. In AWS, there's we can do cd.aws, and in this file, this is a file config that has that's where my access key, my secret access key, all that's stored. You can open this file and edit it. That's fine too. Like, if you ever mess something up, you can just, and you're like, why is this messed up? You might have to delete this folder. And then when you type in AWS config, it will regenerate it for you. All right. If you need to change your region, you can see, like, you can just open this file and change your region. Okay. You'll kind of see how to do that. So I just wanted to show you, this is where everything is stored. From there, I'll let you get started with that, but just to show you kind of what we'll do next is basically next up is to deploy and create EC2 machines. An EC2 machine is just a computer, all right? And if you think about it, if we're going to have a Flask application running, we don't want that on our personal laptop, because then we have to keep our laptop open at all times and blah, blah. We want to have the Flask application running on one of AWS's computers. So that's what's coming next. All right. Let me. All right. Okay. So as we kind of said, like an EC2 machine is just a computer. Okay. It is still like kind of like the fundamental service of AWS, which probably makes sense. And when you think about it, and when you like deploy, an EC2 machine, when you like kind of boot one up, what really is involved is kind of like multiple different components. Okay. And AWS like separates them, so they distinguish between them. So the first one, probably like the main one, is the server. By the server, we just mean like your laptop, right? Like the actual machine that has the CPU that's running a process, right? That can deploy, that we can run Flask on, or anything else, anything that you can run on your computer, you can basically run on an EC2 machine. They also have, like the hard drive, right? That's like almost like a separate component of an EC2. The same way that you can think of like an external hard drive, like being a separate thing from your computer. Then, where does that computer actually live on the internet, right? That's the IP address. Okay, so the key word there is address, right? This is like the identifier, just like a business address or home address, right? This is the location, effectively, of the computer. Okay, and then the other thing is the firewall. So by that we mean who is able to access this computer and how are they able to access it, right? Like as we'll see, there might be multiple different programs running on your computer, and maybe you only want the public to be able to access one of those programs, but not all of them. Okay, so that's like the firewall. The firewall is, do we allow anyone to access this? Do we allow anyone to access anything? Right? Each specific like program running will give separate access, rules as to who can access this. And then the SSH key, say you want to log into the computer, and we'll see how you can do that. Basically access AWS's like command line, like access their the bash program. You'll need to provide an SSH key. It's just a password, essentially. It's a long file, a long like string of characters that will allow us to get through and access the computer. All right. So when we boot up an EC2, you can really just think of like multiple different components of it. There's the server where everything's running on. There's the hard drive. There's the SSH key, which allows us to access the server through bash. There's the firewall, which specifies the various rules. And then there's the IP address, right, which is like where this computer is actually located. For AWS, right, they have their own terms for each of these, right? So the server is called an EC2 instance. The firewall is the security group, right? That's the set of rules that says who can access this and how. The IP address is the IP address. The SSH key is what they call like the key pair. And then the hard drive is called Elastic Block Store. Okay, so EBS, you'll see. All right, so those are just the different like components of this. Let's create an EC2. I was gonna delete this. Dang it. Oh well, we'll create a new one. So from the console, basically you just type in EC2. I can also just go back to AWS. Typically it's the first one you'll see is EC2. So just click on EC2, right? This is to create an instance. You can see I have two instances, and here's like those different components, right? You can see we have the instance. How many instances running is still 0 though, but you're going to have these instances. There's the security groups we talked about. There's the key pairs, right? That's the SSH key, right? The security group is the firewall. The IP addresses. Volumes, I think, is the EBS, right? That's the storage, the hard drive storage. So anyway, we'll click on You can click. You can actually just do it from here. You can click on Launch Instance, but I'll click on Instances, and then I'll click on Launch Instances. All right. You can see that these are my various instances. But it's only looking for those that are actually running. If I delete this, I have various machines that are like stopped, right, just to save me money, because I don't think it charges me while these are stopped. So now let's just click on Launch Instances. Also notice these instances are located kind of like we said, everything is associated with a location. So one thing just to be careful about is like if you click on US East, like Ohio, notice that you no longer see any instances located here. So why does this matter? Because you don't want to forget that like you have a bunch of stuff running on a region and then you're paying for it and you don't realize it, right? So like for me, I'm just always doing stuff in the US East one location. Then I'll click on Launch Instance. And basically you give every service a name, right? Because these instances you might have more than one instance, and you might have like one running your Flask application, another one's running Prefect, right? So you want to just know what's running what, just as a way to manage it. So you can just call this like 20 sample instance, and that's fine. All right, so this is just the name I'm giving it to it, so I can identify it. Now, this part, you can think of this as like walking into Best Buy, and then how are you going to basically like purchase a computer? So the first decision you make is like, what do you want to purchase? Like, do you want a Windows machine? Do you want a Mac machine, right? This just has, what we'll do is just have Linux installed on it, because that's really all we need. But if you wanted to, like for more money probably, you could boot up a computer that has Mac software installed on it. Then from there, right, you specify like the actual, the hardware, right? So this is the software that you want running on it. And then from there, it's the hardware. So here you can see we have, this T2 Micro. The idea is keep it as cheap as possible. So, you can see it has like one CPU, 1 gigabyte of memory, right? It's like all this stuff is fairly small, but you're just specifying the hardware. If you wanted more, right, you can see that you can go up. So 8 gigs of memory, 2 CPUs, right? 16 gigs of memory. So you can and you can see that the price goes up as the hardware becomes, as the resources increase. Okay. All right. So we'll just do this. Free tier eligible. That's always a good thing. Okay. So what do? We specified the software. We specified the hardware, right? And then the next thing is the key pair. So just remember, the key pair is how are we going to access my EC2 machine? What I'll do, I've already have various ones, but what I'll do is I'll create a new key pair. What you want to think about is like, literally think of a lock and key, okay? So just like you can put a lock on your doors and you have a key that accesses it, it's the same exact thing. So we put the lock on the computer, and then we're going to have on our laptop, we'll have the corresponding key that will open the lock. All right. So if we wanted to, we could install, have an existing, I have like various keys on my computer. I could use an existing key pair, but we're going to create a new one. So I'll just click over here, click on create a new key pair, and I want it to be a .pem file, and then also specify the name of the key pair. So I'll just call this EC2 2024 is fine. And then I'll do create key pair. Okay, so this is like going to the hardware store buying a lock and key. All right, and now this is going to be associated. This is the lock that's going to be on my computer. And you didn't see it. It automatically downloaded the file on my computer. So I can probably find this if I type EC2. There it is. You see this? This is my .pem file. And what I want to do is take this it's probably in my download somewhere. what I want to do is take the .pem file and move it to an SSH folder. So we have a hidden folder called .ssh. All right, if you don't, you can make one. And then I'm just going to cd into it, cd.ssh. This is where you can see I have various PEM files here, right? Here's a PEM file from, previous times I just created EC2 machines. Here's another one. The one I just did one, in prepping for the lecture, this one. But what we'll do is I'll just drag and drop it here, right? That gives me the path, EC2 2024, and I'll just copy it, not copy it, let's move it, MV, that file to the current directory, and then it should be here, EC2 2024, okay? So now I have the PEM file there. If you want to, we can look at it. I'll just type in head, just show you the first 10 lines of it. All that it is it's just a string of characters, right? And this crazy string of characters is the key that will open the lock and let us access the computer, okay? So, okay, here's the next thing. This is the security group, right? The firewall, parentheses, security groups. Security group is a set of firewall rules that control the traffic for your instance. Add rules to allow specific traffic to reach an instance. So this says allow, you can see when it says create security group, we'll do that one. Allow SSH traffic from anywhere. So you can choose, this is my IP address, right? It's right here. If I just wanted to, and you can put Google, what is my IP? So I think it found this is my IP address. So, when you're connected to the internet, you're given an IP address. You could say, hey, I only want this specific computer to be able to access my EC2 machine. You could say, hey, I want only computers that live in this building to be able to access my IP address. Say if you run an office building. But we're saying allow anyone. All zeros, 0.0.0.0/0 means anyone on the planet. That's going to be okay for us because you're still going to need the .pem file, right? So you're still going to need that crazy string of characters to get access to it. So for me, it's still okay. So we'll say allow SSH traffic from anywhere. And then remember we said that this is kind of separate, right, as the EBS volume, the hard drive. It gives us a certain amount of hard drive. This is fine. We're not going to be paying for this, which is what we want, 8 gigs. It's fine. It says we're eligible up to 30 gigs, but I don't think we need it. Save Amazon some money. Why not? Okay, so now we are creating our computer. If I click on instances, so it says successfully initiated a launch of an instance, right? And then this, which one was it? Oh, it's this one. Oh no, terminated, it's this one. See, it says pending, okay? So we are creating it, but it's still getting set up. If you click on it, right, sample instance, now it says running. That's very nice. And the main thing we want to do is actually try to connect to this, right? Connect to the computer. So the easiest way I know to do this is click this button that says connect. And this will now give us instructions. So what does it tell us to do? You just have to follow these step by step. So it says open an SSH client. That means your terminal, okay? Then locate your private key file. That's our .pem file we just created. The key used to launch this instance is EC2 2024.pem. Look how nice it reminds me. Okay, EC2 2024.pem. Run this command if necessary to ensure your key is not publicly viewable. Remember, our computers all have an IP address. So imagine if you connected to my laptop. I want to make sure you can't view this thing from outside my laptop. I think that's what that means, to make sure it's not publicly viewable. So this chmod sets the permissions on the file to not allow some other computer to get it and read this file. So this is a security measure that AWS makes sure that you do. So we're going to do that. So chmod 400 ec2 2024.pem. Press return. I think that worked. I don't know why there's extra. I'll just do it again. Okay, now connect to your instance using its public DNS. Remember, this is the address. This is the domain name. Now, this is just to cover this really quickly. You can basically think of the IP address and the domain name. They're very similar, but remember, like if you go to jigsawlabs.io or espn.com, like that's the public domain name and then what that will do is point you to the IP address. Okay? So the domain name in theory is supposed to be easier for someone to remember. Here we're just getting something auto-assigned, so it's not very easy to remember either. But what we can do is now connect using this line here. So what's going on here? Let's copy this. SSH-I. So we're going to SSH, meaning we're going to secure shell, right? So meaning access the shell, the command line or access bash in my AWS machine and provide the key -I EC2 2024 PEM. So we're going to access this file, which has that crazy string of characters. So this is me basically providing the key to this machine. And remember, this machine has the lock on it, right? So if I provide the right key, it should open up. So I'll press return. And now it says the authenticity can't be established. This key, the fingerprint, are you sure you want to continue? We'll just say yes, press return. And now we are connected, okay? Notice here it says EC2, we're connected as this EC2 user at this IP address, IP 172. I wonder if that actually, I've never looked at this before. Public IP, oh, there it is, private IP, 172.3.1. 172.3.1.17.26. Okay, so we are accessing the AWS machine. There's nothing on it. You can type pwd to see where we are. Here's /home EC2 user, right? If you want to stop accessing it, you can just type exit, and now we will leave. See, the connection is now closed, and now we're back on our computer. So whenever we want to access it, we can just type in this string of characters, right? Provide the PEM file and also the public IP address, where this is saying log in. This EC2 user is saying log in as the EC2 user. And then this is the public IP address that we're logging into. If you do not, one thing to be careful of is you need to, you have to basically be in the correct folder when you're doing this command, right? Meaning you have to be where your file is. Like if right now I'm in, why did I do that? Right now I'm in the folder that has my, which one was it? EC2 2024, right? I'm in this folder. If I am in the wrong one and then I try it again, see, it says identity file is not accessible. It can't find it, right? And it gives me an error, okay? I could also just provide, the absolute path to it, which probably .ssh/, is that right? Do I have to do this? Yeah. And now, right, so I just provided the absolute path to the file, and that worked as well. But you have to provide the path to the file, whether it's relative or absolute. What else? From there, what we'll do is, and the reading will kind of walk you through it, is actually moving our code like a Flask app onto our EC2 machine. Okay? So let's just review kind of what we did so far. The main thing is, you set up the EC2 machine and then you click on connect. Okay? And then you need to, run this command to set the right permissions on your file. Make sure you're where your file is located. And then you can see how to connect to the instance. All right, and this will log you in. One other thing to talk about. Let's go to instances. probably like the most important thing to be careful about or to like pay attention to with really any of the services is the security group. So this is all about my instance, right? You can see it has, I don't know, the ID. This is the key pair, right, that we talked about that's associated with it. If we click on security, okay, and then I scroll down, we can see this is the security group, okay? And then this is the inbound rule. Let me click on this. Okay, so this is the security group associated with it. We don't have to right now, but just know, you can change the inbound rules. So for example, here I said, hey, anyone, remember I said this when we first set it up. We said anyone can connect through SSH, like any computer can do that. And that's this 0.0.0.0 thing, right? It says anyone can do this. If we delete this rule, right? I just want to show you. Right now, right? Anyone can connect, and here I am. Okay. If I now delete this rule, look, and then I would do save. I don't even know if oh, there it goes. Now I've just said, hey, these are the inbound rules. So this is who's allowed to walk in to my computer. And now I said basically no one can. And now I try to do this again. Now it's going to hang. See that? We're not getting in. Okay? Because we just said no one's allowed in. So how will I fix this? I can click on Edit Inbound Rules. I can click on Add a Rule. And then I can do SSH. Okay? This will, SSH, but every service is assigned a port, a location that the service runs on, or the process runs on. So for SSH access, it's 22, and then we'll say anyone can access it, right? Source anywhere. Then I'll do save rules, and then we are good, I think, right? Now it goes back to saying anyone can access it. We look good. And let's press up and try to connect, and now we're back in. All right. So this is just to show you how did we get to this. You go to your EC2 instance. We can see that we have one running. I'll click on the instance ID, and then we'll click on security down here. So you just scroll down a little bit, and you'll see security. And then you can click on, there's inbound rules, and there's outbound rules. Outbound rules is let's say we set up on my EC2 machines to scrape various websites. What is it allowed to access? Or hit various APIs. What is it allowed to access? We're saying you can hit any APIs. Typically, the outbound rules you can just allow to access anywhere, but the inbound rules, who can access you, right? That you make more secure. And then I just clicked on the security group. Let me do that again. So I scroll down, I click on the security group, and then here's the inbound rules, and I click on Edit Inbound Rules. All right? And then from there you can, add a rule if you need, delete this, etc. Change who's allowed to access. Can we reject a few notorious IPs and accept all others? Probably. I'm trying. You can probably. I don't know how, but I mean, you can specify. Here you can be more and more restrictive, essentially. But yeah, you can Google that. I'm not quite sure how. Cool. And then save the rules. And by the way, this is one other thing to point out is this is just allowing SSH access. When we boot up Flask, right? Flask is going to run on port 5000, or whatever it is. What we're going to need to do is say hey, we need web access. So HTTP access, that's on a different port. Here it's on port 80, which is the typical port for when we run, when you boot up a web application. Okay, and allow it to be public. So anyway, let's delete that and we're good. Cool. Application to the EC2 machine. So let's start here. If I go to my instances, right? So this is my running instance, the sample instance thing. I'm gonna click on it here. All right. And now, okay, we see the public EC2. Here's the SSH. So here's what we want to do. I have this application code, right, which has, if you look at it, it has the contents of like a Flask app, right, the run.py, source, requirements.txt. Well, the first step, I guess we want to do is, I could connect to it again. So just, run this line, ssh-i, connect. Notice I'm using like the absolute path here, right? So I can be from any folder, effectively. And then if I just connect, if I type ls, you can see there's nothing in my hands, right? Nothing in there. So let's exit. And now we're back on my computer. And this time we'll do the following. I have it up here. Here we go. So I'm doing SCP, right? That stands for secure copy. The -i, this is where I'm putting in my PEM file, right? So I have access to move these files over. The -r, that's for recursive. So not only, and move the app folder. So that's in AWS deploy. So I'm moving the contents of the app folder as this user, as the EC2 user, to the public IP, right, to this address on the computer. So notice that matches this, EC2 44, 222, 210, right, EC2 44, 222, 210. Okay, and then I have this :/home/EC2 user. This is the folder that I want to place my files in. So I want to place the contents of my app folder in /home/EC2 user on this computer. Okay? So now I'll press return. And you can see that this is moving over those files onto the machine. So this is in the reading, but again, it's secure copy, SCP, pass the PEM file, recursive, the contents of the app folder as the EC2 user, just like, you have a user in your Mac, right, Jeff Katzy or whatever it is, over to the public IP address, in this folder, the folder. So now I can SSH, right? So I'll now connect to there. And now if I look, right, where am I? Here's my present working directory, home EC2 user, right? I was supposed to move those files over there, and there's app, okay? So now I can cd into app if you want. And you can see why we learned so much, why we practice bash. That's all you really get, on an EC2. And there's, my requirements.txt, run.py, source, right? You can look inside source. There's, probably the init of my Flask application. So we're going to want to boot this up, okay? In order to, so all we did essentially so far was just secure copy the contents of my application over to my EC2 machine, and then we connected to my EC2 machine. Let me move through this step. I don't have these memorized. So the next thing we have to do is, hold on, sudo yum upgrade. Okay, so this is basically, so we need to, so the sudo means, right, super user do. So as a super user, upgrade yum. Yum is a package manager. So the same way we use pip for like Python packages, yum is for like Linux machines to install certain software. So you can see later on what we do is we're installing Python, we're installing pip, we're installing tmux, right? So I'll just do sudo yum upgrade. I'm still on my AWS machine. Oh, and it seems like we already have it, so we're good. And now let's install Python 3, pip, and tmux, whatever that is. Okay, and we're going to say yes. All right, so it looks like we have successfully installed those packages. So now you can probably run Python 3, and now that's on my EC2 machine, right? So we're installing our dependencies. We already have our code on there, so we're actually pretty good. We already moved in our application, right? That's this thing. So we copied that over. And now what do we need to do, right? So this makes sense, right? What we should be doing is install -r requirements.txt, right? Install my pip packages. It says we need to do this -- user. Let's see if it makes me do that. Pip install requirements.txt. It's actually working. And now what we want to do is boot up Flask. So let's take a look at the contents of my run.py. Yeah, I should be able to just do Python 3 run.py. Oh, it says serving permission denied. Okay. So the permission denied is because I have to do this. I have to run this as a super user. I have to run the command as a super user. So I can do this. This is still going to break, but we'll get a little closer. So I'm doing super user do Python 3 run.py. And now you see this? It says no module named Flask. So the issue here is that when I did the pip3 install requirements.txt, I need to install those libraries as a super user. Okay? That's why it's not saying I have this library installed. So we can just do sudo. So basically we're going back a couple steps where we're running this requirements.txt as a super user. Let's do that. I think this is why I did the -- but this will work. And then now I can do sudo python 3 run.py. So now run this. You see this? Now this is working. Okay. If we want, at this point, yeah, so these are the errors we went through. At this point, if I go to my instance, and let's go to my public. Oh, we could go here too. Let's see if it may. I think this will work. Let's take a look at. I don't remember which path I have running. It's open to. So here I'm making a request, right, to this. I'm surprised that it doesn't. I might have to do this as HTTP. I wonder if that's... See this? I'm making the request as HTTPS. I have to do this as HTTP. Oh, and now we have another issue. Okay, I know what's going on. So it's still not connecting. What's probably the issue here is with my security group. Okay, so let's go back to my security groups. I hope the reading talks about this. Let's click on instance. Now we are in the instance, right? And now I'm going to scroll down. And if there's an issue, it's almost always with the security groups. So let's take a look. What we have is on port range 2022, we allow access to anywhere. But the issue is that's just for SSH access. That's just what allows me to connect to the shell. We need to edit this so that I also get access, HTTP access. So now I'm going to click on Edit Inbound Rules, click on Add a Rule, and now we'll say HTTP and allow access on port 80. Let's click Save the Rules. Oh, and I'll say anyone can access this on port 80, which makes sense. I want anyone to be able to access my nice little website. And now that's working. And now let's call this again. Oh, there you go. And actually, you can see it says welcome to the app now. So this worked. Okay. So let's just go through again what had to happen. So the first thing we did was, we copied over our code. Let's cut this. So we did SCP, copied our code, right? With the PEM file. We have to specify that to be able to copy over to this IP address as this user, and then to this folder, right? Next thing we did was then, go in, connect SSH into our machine, and we saw our various, our code base essentially. Okay, so we can CD here, and here's our code base. The next thing we need to do, we need to make sure we have the yum packages, right? Like Python, pip, tmux we haven't used yet, but we will. We need to make sure we have those installed on our machine. So what we did there was we did this, yum upgrade, make sure yum itself is up to date, and then install these packages. Okay, and then from there we basically needed to install the pip packages, right? We need to install everything in my requirements.txt, which is just Flask apparently. So how do we do that? Remember that if we didn't do this as super user, then we ran into an error. So sudo pip3 install -r requirements.txt. Okay, install this. This error, I think that we could do it as -- user, but I'm not going to chance it right now. So anyway, we installed the packages, and then the next thing we need to do was do super user do python3 run.py. Okay, so this booted this up, booted up Flask, and now we still had a problem. The first problem we had was if we make the request to https:// this is going to break still. Okay, because in order to do that, you need like a certificate for HTTPS requests. So we're not doing that right now. Instead, we're just going to give ourselves access on HTTP. But this still broke because in our security group, right, we did not enable HTTP access. So we had to go to our EC2. Let's go to our instances. Click on it. Then go to security. And then from here, click on the security group. And now click on edit inbound rules. And make sure that we are allowing basically anyone to access from HTTP. Okay. Then now we can make a request to HTTP, our public IP address, and I guess Chrome automatically is doing that, and this is going to hit our Flask application. And you can see that too, it's logged right here, made a GET request to our root path. One other thing to note, one thing that's annoying is like, how do I exit out of here? How do I exit out of the terminal without actually terminating my my Flask application? And there's a couple ways you can do this. One is you can use tmux to do this. That's what that library was. The reading shows you how to use tmux. Yeah, we can do it. So basically, this we do tmux new, and this will create a new tmux session. It's basically like a terminal session. And you see this, now I'm in this tmux thing. And what's going to be nice about this is from this tmux session, so all I did was do tmux new -s, my test app. Then I'm going to run my Python, my Flask application. Okay, so I'm running this. And now what I can do is I can exit my tmux session. And you can see that we detach, or sorry, not end it, but detach from it. So we detach from the tmux session by pressing Control B followed by the letter D. So Control B followed by the letter D. You see that? I'm detached from this session, but I didn't end it. It's still running, and it's still running my Flask app. So even though I'm detached from it, if I go here and I make another request, it's still working. And now I can type exit, and we are still, we still have this running. We can reconnect to this too. Oh, tmux ls. Does it show you how to access it? Let's try it. So you can see this is the tmux session still running. And then I think I can do, if I just do tmux my test app, does that connect? Nope. I'm not sure how to connect to it. I'll have to look that up. But we can connect to this session, and then, like if we needed to, shut down the server or whatever. Let me see. Yeah, Miles.
Minerva put it in the comments. dash A or A dash T my test app, I think.
Oh, thanks.
But my question is, referencing your Flask application when it's running is, I'm just a little bit confused. You know, if you're on our local, we need to write in 127.0.80, right, which is essentially localhost for the HTTP port, I think. So how is it that accessing our EC2 instance IP address becomes a proxy for just that localhost?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Let me show you this. So let's connect. So I did what Narapati said, which is tmux a dash t, the name of the session. Okay. So there's a couple things that we needed to do in Flask in order to get this working. So one thing to note is this is the address, localhost, port 80. Okay. Normally, this is the kind of the first key things. By default, you might remember Flask is not running on port 80. But I need to, when you go to Google or any other website, the default way that you should be accessing it, like you access a publicly available website, is through port 80. So the first thing I have to do is we had to make Flask available on port 80. How do we do that? Let me just, let me exit out of here for a second. I'll show you. I'm going to exit out. I'm going to show you the code. So the first thing I did was I set the port to port 80 here in the Flask code. So now even locally, if I run Python 3, run.py, it's good. You notice it's running on port 80. The other thing is that we're running, what you can see here is that we set the host 4 zeros. What does this do? This says that any computer on the web can access my Flask application. If you don't do these two things, especially if you don't do this, you can only access the Flask application from your local host. From your own laptop that's running it. Like no one else can access it. But if you do this, if you put the 4 zeros here, you're saying, hey, any computer, can make a request to my Flask application. Does not matter their IP address. And I'm going to be running this Flask application on port 80. Then this port 80 has to line up to the secure, this rule that says HTTP access port 80. So when you make a request to the IP address, right? Really what you're doing is :80, okay? Then what happens? This is going to go to the computer, right? Go to translate the domain name to the IP address, basically goes to your machine on port 80. On port 80 is running your service, your Flask application, and it's also, that Flask application is open to the world. Right? And we specified those two things by specifying the port and also specifying the host. This is how you can access it. We can make a request from, this is just a local host, but this means that it's running on your computer, and that from your computer you can access it at this IP, at 127. But that just means access it from the current computer. When someone goes and makes a request here, what this does is it goes to the machine, the EC2 machine, and goes to that port and makes a request to your Flask application. All right. So just to show you that, maybe this will make it a little more clear, let's SSH back in to my AWS machine. I think we still probably have my tmux sessions. Oh, we don't have it. Let's just do this one more time. There's an easier way to do this, but it's all right. We'll create a new tmux session. I'm surprised it didn't still exist. So create a new tmux session, and then here's my app. If you look at cat app, cd into app, let's do cat run.py. Here's my create app. Notice, right, host all 4 zeros here. Then let's run it. So we'll do sudo python 3 run.py. And now this is running. It says, notice it says the same thing. Available, this is how I can access it from my EC2 machine. I can still access it, from here, from my EC2. But for the rest of the world, how do they access it? They access it by going to, the public IP address and then going here, all right? The :80. So now I can do detach by pressing Control-B-D. And now just to kind of show you that, so here I'm still on my, why is this not? Okay, here I'm still on my AWS machine. If I do curl to, what is the address? It's, I can probably just do localhost :80. I wonder if I have to, you see that? If I do curl localhost 80, it says welcome to the app. So from the machine that's running it, you still get access to, this localhost just means make a request to the current machine on this port and see what you get back. But when you're on a different, when you're on your laptop, like any of you can plug in, can put this in the browser and it should display this. Okay. In Narapati.
So I'm just curious, because the point is standard HTTP for HTTP, right? If you change to anything else, would it work for Flash app?
If you do HTTPS,
everything like to. If in our Flash app we specify port number equal RE number.
Oh, yes. That will. So you could, but you'd have to do a couple of things, right? Well, if you want to have this run on a different port number, you would have to, change this to a separate port number, right? And then 2, you'd have to go to the security group, change the port number, right, to change the available, say, hey, I'm going to give access to port number, 90 or something like that, or 3000. That's 2. The third thing you'll have to do is you'll have to do : right, like 3000 here. Like by default, your browser is always making a request to port 80. So you'd have to specify, hey, now I'm going to make a request to a different port here. So this is why you always are, when you deploy an app, it's always available on port 80 because that's what the browsers always do. Okay, so like if you go to google.com, port 80, it's the same website. You see that? Port 80. If I do a different one, it did work initially. Oh well. Maybe they do something a little different. I'm not sure. I would think that this would work. But yeah, port 80 is the default one. Let's see if I do HTTPS. That worked for HTTP. Anyway, so you always want to do port 80 because that's what the browsers will make a request to. All right.
If you look for a difference between the HTTPS port and the regular HTTP port, wouldn't it be like 443?
Oh, maybe that's true. Yeah. Maybe by default HTTPS goes to a different port. It's possible. I don't know, but that's possible. Anything else? Yeah, with HTTPS, you need like a certificate. Like you need to like use a different piece of software. AWS makes it available where like you put in like your email address and some other stuff just to make it secure. So that's, we're not setting that up, but this gives you the idea. All right. So things you had to do, just to review, this will really walk you through it, but it's like copy the code, right? Make sure you install the software. Do this as super user. Then install the pip packages. Okay. Then boot up the Flask app. Then kind of the next thing, here it does take you through it, is update the security group, right? To give yourself not just SSH access, but HTTP access. And then you should be able to, from specifying HTTP, be able to access your Flask application. All right. Cool. And yeah, that's basically it. All right, I'll let you all, other questions, API running. And the way that I did that was, so in the run.py file, right, I just added the host 000, right, so that any IP address, right, like any computer can access my Flask application. And then I specified the port to be port 80. Then the next step is, of course, to do the secure copy, right? So I did the secure copy, put in my PEM file, copy the backend folder to the EC2, as the EC2 user, to the domain name, then into this folder /home/EC2 user. That copied all the files over. Then I SSH'd into the machine. Okay. Now from here, I can CD into backend. And if I do the tmux ls, it looks like I don't have any sessions running, just fine. The next thing I had to do, of course, was sudo pip3 install -r requirements.txt, right? Install the libraries. And then from there, I can do, so the first thing I tried to do was sudo python3 manage.py. This didn't, and then run a development server. But kind of like, you can see that the port is off. It says 5000. So then I try the -p80 flag, and it does say that it changes it. But when I tried to hit it here, it didn't work, which is weird. The other thing I could try to do, we could try the -h 0.0.0.0. Right, and now it says running on all. Let's take a look if this did any better. Oh, and that did work actually. So I don't know why. It did work for me. But I get that's not very comforting if it doesn't work for you. So this was successful for me. For me to run the manage.py run command -p80 -h 0.0.0.0, right? If this doesn't work for you, what you can do is instead you can just directly run the run.py file. So you just do sudo python3 run.py. That's fine as well. Remember that run.py file has, right, this, app.run in there. So let's do that. Python3 run.py. And now this is kind of having the same effect, running on all addresses, right? Localhost on port 80. And we know that that's what should line up with this. And again, this is not secure, right? It's not the HTTPS. In other words, it's HTTP:// and make the request, and that works as well. Okay? So either one is fine with me. However you can get it working is totally fine. The only other thing to check for if it's not working is, of course, the security group, right? Make sure that you have port 80 available and that, right, the source of those requests to port 80 can be anywhere. And of course, you can do that by clicking on the security group and then clicking Edit Inbound Rules. Okay? Making sure it's available HTTP access. All right. The next thing for me to show you is basically connecting a database, because right now, ultimately, if you look at the API, this thing should, if we just hit this, nothing happens, but here, right, we would like to connect to a database, right? So how would you hook a database up to this. Let's see if we can do it. Go back to services. So far we've just been using one service, right, which is our EC2 machine. The next service we can use is RDS, right, which stands for a Relational Database Service. Okay, I'll click on this. And by the way, these can add up. So when you're done, shut it off, just for your own sake. So I click on databases, and then I can click on create database. And now the one I want to create, standard create is fine. The one I want to create is Postgres, which is right here, the elephant guy, right? Okay, this version is fine. We can do the free tier, that works fine. It's cheaper, obviously. But somehow, even though it says it's free, I wouldn't trust it. That don't have this just running always. Right? I'm keep taking note of what region I'm in. I'm in Virginia. This is the date. Remember, we said that each resource gets a name and identifier. So this is database 1. That's fine. And now this is to log into your Postgres. In other words, remember if I just type in, for my local machine, if I type in PSQL, right? I'm logged in as a user, and then some of you all might have set a password that when you log in you have to type in a password as well. That's what that is about. This right here is what is the username that you'll log in as, and then what's the password. I'm just going to put password, and then put password again. All right, and then this is all fine. So it's, this is the amount of space that we're giving, 1 gig of memory, the allocated storage. That's fine. Okay, this is important. For public access, you want to put yes. All right. If you don't put yes, you cannot connect to it from your laptop. All right. So, if you forget, you can kind of, delete it and start over, or probably edit it. But I'm just going to switch public access to yes. The other thing to look at is the VPC security group. We'll keep default, but I want to take a look at it after it's created and see, right? Because maybe this is stopping. We want to make sure this doesn't stop any access. Database authentication password, right? That means that I have to type in that, password. I set my password as password, so I have to type that in as well. I don't care about this performance. If you have it on, it's not a big deal. I just don't care about it. Estimated monthly costs. It's supposed to be free, but again, I wouldn't trust it. And now let's do create a database. Let me see if there's questions. AWS sent me a bill for $17. Yeah, see, that's what I mean for running RDS. Yeah, so you do want to shut this thing off after the class is over. All right. I don't need, see, look what they're trying to do. Let's click on database 1, and eventually, you see the endpoint? The endpoint will get a URL, just like our EC2 machine does. And then what I want to do, notice publicly accessible is set to yes. You should look at that and make sure it's set to yes. Then let's click on the security group, and let's take a look at that. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, no, here it is. So this is the security group ID. I'm going to click on it. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. So we want both of these. So Postgres by default is running on port 5432. So we want to make sure that, so this is publicly available, right? And we get SSH access, which is port 22. All right, so both of these look good to me. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's go back to RDS. I don't see it here. I'm just going to type RDS and click on my instances. Here's my DB instances. Here it is. It's still creating, still starting up. While we're waiting for this, I don't think it's assigned an IP address yet. Yeah, it's still just taking a minute. Okay, this is what we can kind of talk through. So eventually it will give us an endpoint. Remember that remember that like in order to connect to like Postgres, we type PSQL, right? If we want to connect to a specific database, we do like PSQL-D, right, for like north winds or etc. Now, if you want to connect to a specific database at a specific like location, that's the host -h, all right, I believe. So what we want to do is basically say like don't, by default you're connecting to your database on your computer, but what we want to specify is connect to a database located, somewhere else, located eventually it should assign me an endpoint, and it still hasn't. It says current activity. Looking to see if this thing is still, yeah, you see that it's still creating. It's all right. Let's just take a look at the database reading in the meantime. AWS adding a database. I just want to make sure I have this command right. So PSQL, we did all this. Set the identifier. We set the publicly accessible to yes. We checked the security group, right, to make sure that 5432 was available. And then we clicked on our database. We waited. Eventually, we want to see this thing become available, and we want to see an endpoint, which will tell us where we can connect to it. And now you see this PSQL-host. So we're going to have to specify, the location of the database that we want to connect to, and specify the port and the username. Remember, we set this as Postgres as well when we first set up our database. We set the username to Postgres. I wonder if I have an image of it. Here it is. When we set the master username, right, we set it to Postgres. Okay? So that's what we're going to specify. Let's see if we can do that. First, we're going to need to see, do we actually have a... Here's my database. Here it is. So it's finally assigned me an endpoint and a port. So now we're trying to connect to it. So we can do PSQL --host equals, and then we'll put the name of the endpoint. If I just do this and then do -p5432, oh, look at that. So this is interesting. So notice this is off, right? Because it says password for user Jeffrey Katz. What it's doing is it's taking my username from my local computer and thinking it can log into my, Amazon machine, database with it. So if I put in the right, password, it's going to break. So it says password authentication failed for user Jeffrey Katz, right? That's because that's wrong. We don't have a user Jeffrey Katz on that. It should be, I think -U Postgres will work. So now it says for user Postgres. And now if I do password, that should connect. So now I'm in. This is my AWS, right? RDS database. So if you look at the variable one, right, we only have the default ones. This isn't my local machine anymore. So any of the, now you can just treat it like it's, like it's our Postgres machine. We can get out of it. The other thing that we should probably do, let's go to curriculum, AWS, go to AWS deployment lab. We go to, oh no, it's, sorry. Wasn't, maybe I have it the wrong one. What I want to do is run a file. Oh, here it is, a Flask API. See AWS deployment lab. And now here's my Flask API. And now here's my backend. And now I believe, do I not have it? I thought I might have. Yeah, okay. So let's take a look. If you look at the data, no, we don't have it. I thought we would have a migration file. Let's just create one. Imagine we had like a migration file. Let's make one inside data. So we'll call this, create tables. Create table users. And we'll do ID serial. Name text. I think that's right. Semicolon. And let's just delete this. All right. So imagine now we want to run run this file against the database. So we just saw this is how I connect to the database, right? Is specify the host, specify the port, specify the user, and then type in the password, right? And now we're connected. Now disconnect by doing /q. All right. And now here's my folder for API data. And I have this file. So now if I want to run this file against the database, PSQL, specify the host, specify the port, specify the user, specify the file, right? Create tables, SQL. If we wanted to, we could, create a database, but I think this will just run it once I put in the password. You see that? It created the table on this database. So now if I log in here, so just remove the -f flag, right, which says run the file, create tables against the database. We'll remove that, and now I'll log in again. If I look at the tables, here's my users table. Okay? Let's just do this. Let's do this on a specific database. Say we do this on create database Foursquare. And now we'll get out of it. And now we'll do create table users, insert into users. I always forget how to do, just do Bob. I hope that's valid. And now we'll just try to run this again. So we're going to run the file, create tables.sql, and then the insert into statement. Again, on this database located here, port 5432 as user Postgres. And we should probably specify the database too, the database as the Foursquare database. And then run this, and then put in my password. And I did this wrong. Insert into users. Oh, I need to put the table name. No. It's like values. Insert into users. Insert into, and then I put the columns here and then values. So insert into users, the columns will be name, and then the values would be here. The values is just Bob. So that should work. So I'm going to run again on the host, port, file against that database. Right, and that inserted it, okay? And then you can run, any of your Postgres stuff now works, right? I can just connect directly to, connect to Postgres, put in the password again, look at the various databases. Here's my Foursquare database, connect to Foursquare, right? Now I'm connected, look at the tables, right? And then select all from users limit 1, and there's that user that we inserted. Okay. The other thing you can do, so what I like to do is first connect using the command line. All right. But once you do that, then the next thing the reading shows you is that you can use the scicop-g2 library as well. So all the arguments that you used here, you can just plug in to the scicop-g2 library. So the host will be the URL coming from here, coming from your endpoint. Then the user is Postgres. The password I specified was password, and the database is just Foursquare. All right, and then I'll press Shift Return. I'll click Run anyway. Okay, the connection.cursor. And now we'll do cursor to execute, select all from users, fetch all, right? There's Bob. Okay, so this is connecting to my database, right, to RDS. We put in the right password as this user, connecting to the database, and then we issue the select statement. Are we going to build on this database in the future? Can we delete it after we finish it? We'll only use it for the next lab, like this connecting to RDS lab, and then you can delete it. So you can delete it after you're done that lab. Or like, let's say after you're done, for today. We should be finished. Let me show you that. So if you click on databases, one thing you can do when you're done is select it, click on actions, and you can stop it, right, which will save you money, and you can also delete it. Okay? So there really wasn't much work I did for it. The only main things I did was the biggest thing I did was I clicked that checkbox saying make it publicly available. If you forget to do that, you can just click on the database, and then you can click on modify. And so when you go to modify, you can change any of those initial things. Make sure that you just set the password, because you don't want to accidentally set it to like blank and then get confused. And then again, I'm just looking to make sure that the public where is it? There was that checkbox that said make sure that it's publicly available, but now I can't find it. It's probably additional configuration. There we go. Under additional configuration, we just have to make sure that's publicly accessible. Okay. And then I can click continue. All right. And then here's my database. And again, if I want to delete it, actions, delete. This snapshot is to like save your data if you want to do that. You don't have to. Confirm deletion, type delete me into the field, and do that. Okay. All right. So that's it. Again, the main things I recommend are, it's really about just understanding the command. PSQL, specify the host, right? This comes from that endpoint. Specify the port, specify the user. This is probably the biggest thing you'll forget is if you don't do the user, it's going to use the user. It's not going to use Postgres, right? It's going to log me in as Jeff Katz, but there is no user Jeff Katz on my AWS instance. Okay, so just remember that as well. -u Postgres, and it's fixed. All right, cool. Okay, you have like the database, right? And then, we give certain, we have like that firewall on the database, right? The security groups. I don't know where to put it here, right? And these are like the set of rules that apply to your RDS instance. So, what I recommend initially doing is, setting the rule that basically says, 000, basically any computer can access from port 5432. Okay, and then also it's good to have like that any computer can access port 22. So this is for SSHing into your machine. You don't really have to use that probably. And then this is for connecting the database, like actually establishing the connection to PSQL. So you can see, if you look at the way to kind of look at it, unfortunately, security groups are always under EC2, even when it's technically your RDS. Let me just show you that. So if I go to my RDS and then click on the instance and then click on the database, and now here I click on security groups. You can kind of look at the ID SG3E associated with my database. See that once I click on it, it says EC2. That's just the way it is. And now we can click on it and kind of see details of it. And this is what mine is saying is, if you look at the inbound rule, is saying, okay, any computer can access port 5432. And because of that, right now I'm on my MacBook, right? If I go, just type in the password, then I'm connected. All right, so that's one way. And then obviously, because it's any computer, I can also be on my EC2 machine, right? This is also a computer, and I can connect from my EC2 machine to that same database. All right, so like any computer can do that. Now, I don't think anyone's got into the later readings, but what the later readings talk about, and I think it will maybe help you understand security groups, is what you can also do is you can say, hey, I don't want to allow any computer on the planet to access your database, but rather just my EC2 machine. Okay? So in this case, what we'll do is we'll say, like, here's my AWS EC2. What we can do is say only this guy gets to access the database, and basically like your laptop or anything else, right, does not. Okay, this guy does not. So we'll say only this guy gets to access it. And the way that we can do that is if you look at the EC2, so this is my EC2 instance. I'll just show you that. You go to my instances, right? And this is, the IP address. This is what we're connected to over here. IP 172.3.1, IP 172.3.1, all right? And then we can look at the security group here. If I can find it, security. Okay. So here, this is the security group, SG0707717. So this resource, this EC2 is like tagged with a security SG, I forgot what it was, 0717. Oh, something with a lot of sevens in it, right? What we're going to do over here on my RDS is say, hey, instead of allowing any IP address to access 5432, only allow resources that have that security group 0717. Only allow things that have the security group 0. So that means this can access it, but nothing else can. All right? So the way we do that is we can, so it was, so my EC2 instance, this is my instance, it says sample instance, right? And it has that security group of SG07717. All right, so I just copied it by clicking on this thing. Then I'll go to RDS. I'll go to the security group. And I want to change the inbound rule. Just click on this again. So currently this says anyone can access on 5432. Let's change that. I'm going to add a rule that says for our Postgres, we'll allow, and I'm just going to paste in my security group. All right, so now you can see that. So I'm saying only things with this tag, and I should delete this one. Right, so this is saying anybody. I'm going to delete that. I probably don't even want this one either, but I'll just keep it. I think this will suffice. And click Save. So now if you look at the inbound rules, this is saying only something with the source of this that has this tag on it can access it. So now let's go back to my laptop. All right, this is my laptop. And this time, if I try to access on this RDS instance, it's going to hang. See that? Doesn't work, which makes sense. But if I go to the EC2 machine, right, I'm on the EC2, and I try to access it, this worked fine. Okay. So again, it's like you basically, like, drawing it out sometimes is pretty helpful. So what we did, just to remember, sorry, I shared the wrong thing, is we just saw the tag, the security group associated with my EC2 instance, and then for the RDS instance, we went to that security group and we said, who should we allow access to this port? Only something that has this tag, right? Only something that has this tag on it. And the way that we did that was we went to the RDS instance, went to edit inbound rules, right? And then associated it with this tag. Okay? It said you need to have this tag on it in order to access. Does that make sense? More or less? All right. So I will obviously post this.